Stephen Edgington here from Politics UK.
In around 1 year's time, Britain will have left the European Union. A few days ago, it was the exact date at which we triggered Article 50 and the exact date in 2019, in 1 year's time, when Britain will have left. And the EU aren't happy with us leaving at all. Now, you've seen that consistently throughout this whole time. They've been talking about a second referendum, lots of EU politicians such as Guy Verhofstadt supporting that, even many politicians in the Remain campaign on this side pushing for a second referendum and to keep us in the EU. There's a huge amount of pressure on the government and on the British public to stay in the European Union from politicians, big businesses on the Remain side. There's been a coordinated campaign for months. And they say, they support democracy and they just want us to have access to the European market and things like that. But in reality, they don't support democracy. The European Union is terrified of Brexit. And I'm going to go through some of the reasons why the European Union is terrified so much of this huge political event. And in my opinion, one of the best decisions Britain has taken in generations. So the first reason is money. Now, Britain agreed to pay the European Union £40 billion as an exit package as a part of Brexit. Now, this is a huge, large figure. I'll accept that. However, it also is equivalent to 4 years of staying in the EU for Britain. After 4 years, which isn't a really long time if we're being honest, the European Union will have to plug the gap that Britain left. We were the second biggest net contributor to the European Union's budget out of 28 countries. We gave £10 billion a year of our money, net, not gross, net, to the European Union every single year. That's equated to £250 billion since we've joined the European Union in 1973. So the European Union will have to plug this huge financial hole. And where will they find it? Well, other countries will have to pick up the bill. And they're extremely worried that this could cause problems for them, not only financial problems, but political problems, as countries see how much they relied on Britain in terms of net contributions to the European Union's budget. Now, the second reason, which is almost the most important reason for the European Union, is that other states and other people around Europe will see Brexit and say, look, why can't we do that? Why don't we do the same? It hasn't hurt Britain. All these scaremongering stories from the Remain campaign side haven't come true. We haven't lost 800,000 jobs. We haven't lost 500,000 jobs. Now, we have seen a few populist uprisings across Europe. Some of them have failed, some of them have done better. We've had the Italian elections where the Five Star Movement was the most successful party and the socialists were decimated. You've had other movements, Marine Le Pen, obviously she lost, but she got to the final round of the presidential election in France. You've got the Swedish Democrats, and all across Europe, you've got the AfD, who are now the official opposition in Germany. You can see people are getting more angry with the European Union and more angry with the European Union's policy. And as you see Britain starting to grow outside the European Union and do well and do much better, then other countries and the citizens of those countries will start to think maybe life outside the European Union is okay, and maybe we should leave ourselves. And obviously, this has led to the European Union being terrified of this happening, which is why they're attempting to punish us. Now, third is the loss of access to our market. We are the European Union's second biggest export market. We are 15% of all of their trade. Now, that may not sound like a huge figure, but it is. It's hundreds of billions of pounds worth of trade. And not only that, it includes access to our fishing waters, of which boats from across the European Union are allowed access to on an unprecedented scale. It also means that economic migrants from poorer countries can come to Britain no matter what. They're allowed in. They can take jobs which are much higher paid in Britain than in their own country. So loss of access to Britain's market, including fishing, immigration and other areas, means that the European Union will no longer be able to effectively sell into the British market or access goods from the British market as they could have before. And therefore they are scared of this. This means that German manufacturers, French wine growers, whatever, are all going to lose access, Spanish fishermen, and the EU, again, are terrified of this. Well, as they should be. All these businesses are understanding in Europe that they need access to Britain's market, which is a really good incentive for the European Union to give us a free trade deal. Now, fourthly, we have the loss of the UK's rationality in Europe and the rationale of the UK, which for the last 43 years, the UK has been a reforming factor in Europe. It has resisted European federalisation, it has resisted and vetoed things that Britain saw as going too far in terms of a federal or united Europe. I don't think a European army would ever work if Britain was in the European Union. It might have got through eventually, but it would have taken a lot longer because the European Union is a force which is full of bureaucrats and full of federalists who want closer union and want everything to be more centralised towards them with less democratic procedures and less accountability to voters. And Britain simply refused this on many occasions. Now, it didn't win all the battles, it certainly didn't win all the battles, but it was a reforming factor. And now that we've left, it means that smaller countries in Europe, who perhaps were happy that Britain was preventing the EU from doing these extremely radical federalisation proposals and policies, they are going to be worried now that Britain is leaving, because there is no one to reform the club. The little reform that Britain managed to achieve was an achievement in itself, but now that Britain's gone and is going, the European Union has free rein to do whatever it wants and become more centralised and, frankly, less democratic. And fifthly, and not finally, because there are many other reasons, loss of control over Britain. Now, the European Union has historically had control over our courts, for example. The European Court of Justice is the highest court in the land. And without this control, without Britain being in the EU, they will no longer have this control over Britain in so many aspects of our lives. And that doesn't just include the courts. It also includes many laws that were generated in Brussels will no longer apply to the United Kingdom, depending on how far we Brexit. And this will mean that the European Court of Justice and the European Parliament and the European Commission will have a lot less control over one of the world's major economies. And it's fair to say the European Union crave power and crave centralisation and aren't very happy with democracy. And now that Britain is leaving, not only does it show that a country is willing to take back control from the European Union, but it also means the EU loses that power over a major economy, and they can't be happy about that at all. So thank you for watching. If you want to help me out, you can donate to my PayPal link below. There's also a Patreon if you want to help me out there, which will be really useful. Next week, I've got a load of interviews lined up, so I hope no one cancels on me, as people keep on doing. And you can see some interesting interviews with some journalists and some politicians about Brexit and other issues going on. So watch out for them. There hopefully will be quite a few coming out in the coming week or weeks.